Hello, my name is Katie MacIntyre, and I'm your host for the podcast, The Loving Cup, Elevate Your Gratitude. Today is Tuesday, January 23rd, 2018, and I'm live from the FingerLakes1.com studios in Seneca Falls, New York. So welcome. So as I've shared before, I studied psychology in college and did not have the opportunity to study the psychology of gratitude as it came about after I got my degree, but I've always been interested in the power of gratitude and what that does for one's well-being. So I just want to share again something I've shared in the beginning of the podcast series about a man named Robert Emmons. So he's out of the Greater Good Science Center in Berkeley, California at UC Berkeley. So he's really one of the leading scientific experts on gratitude. And he argues that gratitude has two key components. And so first he writes, it's an affirmation of goodness. We affirm that there are good things in the world, gifts and benefits we've received. And in the second part, he explains, we recognize that the sources of this goodness are outside of ourselves. We acknowledge that other people, or even higher powers, if you are of a spiritual mindset, gave us many gifts, big and small, to help us achieve the goodness in our lives. So with that, I wanted to share one quick quote and then introduce you to my guest today. So Melody Beatty says, gratitude unlocks the fullness of life. It turns what we have into enough and more. It turns denial into acceptance, chaos to order, confusion to clarity. It can turn a meal into a feast, a house into a home, a stranger into a friend. So with that, I would like to welcome my guest today. So I have Heidi Nightengale from Auburn.
Hello.
Hello. And Laura Williams-French from Jordan. So welcome. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you for having us.
It's nice to have you here. So I like to start off with having each of my guests introduce the other. So Heidi, would you start and introduce us to?
I would love to.
Oh, great.
Okay. Laura Williams-French was a student of mine 9 or 10 years ago where I teach at SUNY Empire State College, which is essentially one of the SUNYs that really focuses on adult students with alternative ways of learning, including independent study. So there was an independent study that I taught, several of them actually, that Laura was interested in. She was a student who was enrolled in our location of Empire. There's 34 locations. So she found out that I taught a course called Poetry and the Process. And I taught it as an independent study because she was a local student. And as soon as I got her first set of work, which included learning journals along with poetry drafts, I could tell there was brilliance and talent here. And I've been teaching for 13 years in this modality. And I thought to myself, after our first academic consultation, when this woman graduates, I want to invite her out for a cup of coffee. Talk about a cup of gratefulness. So she went on to take another class, independent study with me, where she worked with a mixed style of memoir writing and creative nonfiction essays. And again, the brilliance, the wit just shone. And again, I, had that bingo when she graduates, because I'm very ethical about my work with students. And indeed, when she graduated, I contacted her maybe through Facebook or maybe through,
LinkedIn or...
Right, exactly. And she was all over meeting for a cup of coffee. And I think I even said to her as she was graduating, or maybe as she was, going off that stage, and then we had the reception afterward at the On Center where our graduations are in Syracuse. I think I might have said to her directly, we need to have a cup of coffee, congratulations, etc. So we found that that turned into very regular visits and a very extremely connected friendship. And what I have learned about Laura since being her professor at Empire is that this is truly the most brilliant woman who has learning styles across the board that she excels at. She is a graphic artist and does that work for our publishing house that we'd like to talk about later. She is the mother, the loving, amazing, strong mother of a young adult who is on the autism spectrum. And it is amazing how she parents this young adult and has parented her as a single mom all of her life, along with an older sister to that daughter. And she is a remarkable new wife, newly married. I still think newly married. I think it's in 5 or 6 years.
Almost 6, yeah.
But she has this remarkable generosity of spirit. I can call her, anytime, day or night, to talk about something, whether it's an idea or it's a problem to work through. And I know I have that resource in Laura. And I have very good friends from, around the country. But it's lovely to have this right here in my backyard. And it happened because, little bell of connection went off when I first met her in my office.
Well, that's beautiful. It's beautiful.
She's making me cry over here.
That's okay. You won't be the first one to cry. There's been tears on the Loving Cup before. So would you introduce us to Heidi?
Well, I met Heidi. I took her class. One class she didn't mention that I took with her was her Harry Potter class.
That's right.
Sounds fun.
It was
to study in adolescent psychology using Harry Potter, the series, as a source of examination.
Cool.
Which was, that was fun, and it was kind of indicative of Heidi's nature. She's, my husband refers to her as the fairy lady. She's really the kindest, gentlest, most loving person. And you can hear it in her voice when she talks. There's just something so soothing about Heidi's voice. I love listening to her read her poetry and hear her talk to people, because and she is so wonderful to my daughter, who is on the spectrum and who just thinks of Heidi as like an extra mom almost, that, she can go to Heidi for anything. And she's just so motherly to Marin, and yet she still manages to be firm with boundaries and stuff that Marin needs, and it's just beautiful to see. And her friendship has become she's like an extra sister. It really is. Yes. It goes beyond normal friendship, beyond a best friend. I have 2 really close women in my life, and they are really more like sisters to me than friends, because I can call them at 2 a.m. going, "You won't believe what so-and-so did." And they don't go, "Why are you calling me at 2 a.m.?" They'll wait till after, and then they go, "Please, did you really have to call it 2?"
No, but they answer. They pick up.
They do. They pick up, and they, Heidi's probably still awake.
Yeah.
Her with her all-nighters, but she really is. She's I'm so grateful that not only did we meet, but that we made that connection, and that she, because I probably wouldn't have been the one to initiate, because, she's a professor, and she's so smart, and she's so, and I'm just me. And so if she hadn't been the one to initiate it, I might have been too intimidated to. But, I took a lot of independent studies, and I made an effort to meet all of my professors in person, as long as they didn't live, in Potsdam in January.
That's wise.
And I didn't have a connection with any of those like I did with Heidi. And she's just truly one of the kindest, most giving people I have ever met. And just having her as a friend should be able to go on my resume.
Oh,
wow. She's my friend, so I've got to be okay.
That's beautiful. Beautiful. Well, lovely. So Heidi, you and I have met before,
yes.
But Laura, we have not. So it's very nice to meet you in person. And I love that. I love that Heidi shined a light on you, and to hear about your friendship. So I can't wait to hear more about that. So let's jump in and talk a little bit about gratitude. If you could talk a little bit about thinking to the past year, if there's something that you're most grateful for from your most recent year.
Yes. There's an outstanding event that I know we are both grateful for, and we even consider it divine, a divine kind of gratefulness. And it was about having a cup of coffee together and writing, and some problems that I was having with my children's manuscript, What Fragrance is the Moon, and it going into a second printing, a softcover printing, and that the original publisher had gone out of business, so I needed to get this edition printed and figure out how to do that, but also redo an ISBN number, and I figured all of that out. And I was talking with Laura about that process. And I was also talking with her about how, as a poet, there were so few mid-level publishers left or available for poetry and collections of short nonfiction, etc., that we were finding, maybe because of the availability of new technology and online journals, that print publication like that was just more difficult for writers to find. And that was especially so since the loss of Pudding House, which used to be the premier poetry publisher, had been publishing poetry since 1975. And I was published by them in 2008. But the woman was a single woman, not single, but a single individual who brainstormed this idea, Jennifer Bosveld, and ran it through to 2011 when she retired. And then she did pass away a couple of years after her retirement. And then in 2014, Pudding House was gone. So that leadership and that vision, after Jennifer was gone, that it wasn't there. It wasn't there enough to. So we were daydreaming about this, literally, over iced tea in my backyard. And what could we do? What was the response? And of course, the brilliance of Laura comes out and says, we can do that ourselves. We can do that. And I had told her about the process that I went through with the second edition of What Fragrance is the Moon. And in doing that, I had to develop my own little publishing company logo, name. Laura she jumped right in, as she always does, to help me, created the logo. And I used Clare Songbirds as a nod to Clare at County Clare in Ireland. And her ideas just started popping. And within 30 days, we had a business plan, and we had the paperwork done for the LLC, Clare Songbirds Publishing House. And the work that I've done with my co-publisher in 6 months this year is the single most important thing I'm grateful for. And just a month ago, without thinking about this podcast, I even have this expression in one of my most favorite poems. I have a little chalkboard in my bathroom that I write things on now and then. And just about a month ago, I just was sitting there, and I took the chalk and wrote, "Gratefulness is everything," which is a line from one of my poems. And I strongly believe it. I'm a complete believer in the research you're doing, and so glad that you're getting it out there in the public. So that's something that's the single most important piece of gratefulness. I have sense of gratefulness every day, but for the big one this year, it is working with Laura as co-publishers in developing Clare Songbirds Publishing House.
Beautiful. And I wanted to know where the name came from, so you answered my question about that. How about for you, Laura?
Well, I'm grateful that there's not too many I'm a control freak. I'm going to start right there. And there's not too many people I could think of starting a business with. I'm so grateful for Heidi being who she is and letting me be who I am and not freaking out. Because
Laura has lots of ideas that are brilliant, and I go, because of the energy that it would take to pull it off, and then I just take a breath and say, it's brilliant. You're doing it. We're doing it.
And it really does feel like a divine thing. I mean, us meeting, the poetry being a part of how we met. Mm-hmm. And then about a year ago, my daughter met a man and started dating him, who is a brilliant poet. And that was the other piece that kind of came into all of this, is he was trying to publish, and that's where really finding out what a vacuum there was for him trying to publish. And my daughter has a degree from Empire State College in arts management and marketing. So she's the other piece of this.
Beautiful.
And so had to have all of these things just line up so perfectly was, really, really incredible and just, amazing to us. And so we're all so grateful for it. And, we're all in like contact all the time, and, Jeffrey will call me up and I've got this great idea. And Bria will call up and I've got this great idea. And we're constantly, feeding off of each other. And just that positive energy about being excited about something is huge. Because let's face it, if we watch the news, there's not a lot to be excited about. Not excited in a good way. So it's just really amazing to, have these people that I love and adore and am able to work with and build something. And I have to say, in the last 6 months, we've published, I think we're at like 18 books are either already in print or about to print. And the energy we get back from the authors
That's awesome.
when they see their book or when they get their acceptance. And we're publishing people all over the world, and I mean all over the world. We have a poet in Nepal. We have several in the UK. We have one in the Philippines. We just accepted a manuscript from somebody in Japan. So, and
I just got the chills.
It's this universal
that sense of
that's awesome. Really,
helping
really
a writer find a place for their words and being the publishing company that's been able to do that. And know that for those writers, they know that they're being published by a quality publishing company. We reject a lot. We want to make sure that those who are writing and who are published with us are side by side with excellence. Just like, that was part of that original conversation. Where's the premier chapbook and poetry writing house? Maybe it could be us. But that excitement when our writers and poets get back to us and, they Facebook friend us, and you get the little request and it's, the most recent poet.
And they're posting videos when they get their book. Oh, my book came in the mail today. And, they're
and what they're doing
book.
with their launches and where they're reading. And, the fact that we've helped them do that, help them get their words in print that's an amazing piece of gratefulness. I can't even, my heart just wells with the warmth thinking about that.
And I mean the power of paper.
Yes.
So it's I think fine, to have things published online, but there's something about the weight and the smell and just the.
And I mean, so much of what I do in what I call my day job, the one that is paying my bills right now, is that I produce a physical product, and there's something in us as humans that being able to go, I made this today. Does something for our soul.
Absolutely.
Half of my job is actually creating physical stuff, and then there's a lot of my job that's on a computer doing stuff or
generating ideas,
putting paper,
that then
shuffling it around on my desk. There's
but
a lot of that.
Hands and mind and heart, and it's
but when I can say this is what I can touch something, feel it, and look at it, and it fits in a box or it gets shipped out or whatever. I physically did something today. There is a sense of accomplishment and achievement in that I don't get from daydreaming or although those things feed my soul too. But there is something about having the physical book that's different than my stuff was it was accepted to an online journal. There's a permanence to it, even though it's transient, really. But there's a sense of accomplishment when you can hold your book in your hand and you can. This is what I wrote, There's just a sense there, and I see that universally with all of the poets. They're posting picture of themselves with their book. It came in the mail, or they're, that sort of thing. That there is something in humans that we need to make stuff.
That's great, and I love that you're connected with them through social media and other ways, so that you can be in Japan and you can be in Nepal and you can see what is happening after your work is done.
Yes,
that must be really satisfying too.
It is, and the funny thing that I have, how universal English is like that these people are not only able to speak in English or write in English, but they're able to create art in a language that isn't their native. To me, and it's really amazing stuff. That to me is, because I can read a little bit of French, and I took ancient Greek, and I can probably decipher 2 words. So for these people who are in countries where this is not their native language, and that they're actually writing and creating in a language that isn't their own, to me is just so amazing.
And it gives me gratefulness, really, truly, that English is my first language, and that it is generally worldwide a language that's being taught alongside the native language of peoples, but that it's the language I grew up with. Again, and it's a very complicated language, very complicated rules of grammar and English language grammar usage. And yet for me and Laura, for you, it's the language that we learned in early childhood.
Right.
And, that alone, it's amazing to think about language.
Yeah.
And that this worldwide language of English is something that is very natural for us. It's just our first language.
Yeah, and you don't think about it every day, but I have a first grader who's learned, he can read. He learned to read, and he's still learning to read.
Mm-hmm.
But you forget about all of those rules and exceptions,
right.
and English is very complicated.
Yes.
Yeah. And I studied French in high school and college, and it's totally. The rules are not quite the same, but
right.
I'm good with menus, so I can read like German, Spanish, French. Very good with food and menus.
I can swear in 5 languages, but I shouldn't.
That's good. So think about your whole life and talk to me about something that you're most grateful for.
For me, it's my family. My family is all kinds of dysfunctional in a lot of really fun and interesting ways. And one of the greatest things that I got from my family was a sense of perseverance and a sense of humor. And I think that those two are necessary for each other. I had a grandmother who had a very challenging life. And she said, everything hurts less if you laugh at it. And that is something I have come back to over and over and over again. My family is the kind of family that makes fun of the dead person at their funeral. And we actually have, that's not just an expression. I am so grateful to have been raised in that family because life is hard. None of us are getting out of it alive. And to have been raised by this really interesting group of people who had all kinds of problems throughout their lives, and they managed to still love each other and not hold grudges against each other, and to make fun of each other, but not in a bullying way, but to just like make us all laugh at ourselves. And
Sure.
We all have flaws, and you better learn to laugh at them with everybody else, because I have a flaw, you have a flaw, everybody's got flaws. And to me, that has really been the major factor in everything I've done in my life. Being able to start college when I was almost 40. I had put off to raise kids, and I didn't go to school, and learning to just persist at it and go, okay, I have kids, I'm working, I'm without that sense of persistence that was instilled in me, and also the sense of humor, being able to laugh when the computer dies and you have a paper due tomorrow, and this is really not the end of the world. It feels like it at the moment, but it's not. And that has been the biggest factor in my life overall, and the thing I'm most grateful for.
Wonderful. How about for you, Heidi?
I think that there's so many aspects of gratefulness, and I could talk, as Laura did, at length around my family, which is very close, and I'm lucky to have a large family of siblings. So as adults, we have such fun, and there's such connection around our childhood memories that are always just fun. So I'm grateful for that sort of Irish humor that comes with it all. But I really want to say that I'm grateful for my education. And I truly believe, and worked before teaching at SUNY Empire and Human Services, and I truly believe the quote, I think it was Roosevelt, somebody should Google me to find out, who talked about education being the great equalizer. Mm-hmm. And it's, statistically the one thing that shows that it's that piece that can move people out of poverty into middle class, or etc. So I'm grateful for my education. And one of the things beyond the learning in the classroom, etc., is that I was educated here in the Finger Lakes, My undergraduate degree occurred at Keuka College when they were still a women's college. Graduated in '83, so there goes my age, right? Because I was a traditional age student.
It's just a number.
But then I also went on to Cornell University, so I consider myself a Finger Lakes girl because I grew up in Skaneateles and then had education on Keuka Lake and then Cayuga Lake, and now I live in Auburn on Owasco Lake. That education allowed me, prior to teaching, to make a huge difference in working with families and children in crisis and at risk. And that's what brought me to Empire. I was always an adjunct tutoring the kinds of courses that students in human services would need. And then there was just a time in my career when I realized that I had gotten to the place in human services that was sort of the premier place in terms of goals. And at that same time, just gratefully and divinely, I literally got a call and an offer. Would you be willing to come in and consider teaching for us at Empire and Human Services right there in Auburn? So no commute, right in my hometown. So I'm grateful for that education. And there's one other thing that education, especially at the Women's College, provided me. And that was the understanding and the strength of women and the friendship and the power of women together. And I don't mean power in aggressive ways.
Right.
I mean it in collaborative and team-building ways. And it also provided me with the dearest, longest-term friendships of my life. In fact, I'm dressed today on advice from my friend in New Jersey who FaceTimed me this morning, and I happened to say, I'm on a podcast today, and you know that I'm style impaired. What should I wear? And she said, a turtleneck and a set of
string of
pearl beads because they're classic. And that is a friend whom I met 18 years ago, standing outside our first classroom door, the first day of freshman year, as we went into a Shakespeare class together. And now I'm, best friend in life, and now I'm, FaceTiming her in the morning to say, what do I wear? As she's on her way to teach too.
That's beautiful.
And that's an amazing thing to be grateful for. All those elements that the education provided for me.
So I'm also a graduate of a women's college. I went to Marymount in Tarrytown, New York, and it was an awesome experience.
Yes.
And I have two brothers. So I don't have any sisters, but I have the same similar experiences.
Right.
So let's think about something that in your life you are grateful for now, but at the time you were not grateful for.
Oh, that one's easy. My daughter's diagnosis. I mean, as being on the autism spectrum, I was crushed when she was diagnosed with autism. And my father, I was on the phone with him, and I'm crying, and Dad, and he's like, she's still Marin. And it washed right away. It's like, oh, you're right. Doesn't change her. Doesn't change, because I was like, oh, she'll never get married. She'll never have friends. She'll never do this. She'll never do that. And now I think it's so funny when she talks about being on the spectrum, she goes, my autism. It's hers. It's not, I'm autistic. It doesn't define her. It's something she owns.
Great.
My autism. She always refers to it that way. And that's how she thinks of it. That it's something that's hers, and she owns it, and she can put it away, and she can grow from it. And it, one of the great things of it is she doesn't do the weird, risky teenager stuff.
How old is she?
She's 22. And in emotional development, she's probably 16. She's, but she's like super.
It's her pace.
It's her pace, and she's super responsible. She does get overwhelmed, and she has tactile issues, and her stuff. But she has overcome so much. She was on the part-time dean's list at school this past semester, which is like a huge thing for her when she had to go to summer school in 10th grade because she couldn't, handle her classes. So she has persisted, and she's more and more taking care of her own tasks and maturing and all of that. And it has been such a blessing, and I'm so grateful for having this experience of parenting this child with a disorder or a problem, to being atypical. She has, she's just such a joy. And the way she looks at life and giving me that perspective, because they truly see the world differently than the rest of us, is so amazing. She is such a kind and loving and empathetic person, which kind of goes against the norm of being autistic on the spectrum. But they just experience things differently than we do. And it's just so interesting to see her grow and develop and really embrace the things that make her different, and not take them as I'm handicapped, or this is just who I am, and this is my pace, and I will get there when I get there. And it really has been a blessing, and I'm so grateful for having had the experience of parenting her.
Love that. Thank you for sharing that. How about for you, Heidi?
I have this expression that, sometimes when you pray to God, his answer is no. And the idea around that there's this sort of spiritual knowledge of knowing better. And sometimes what we want is not what's good for us. And I've had lots of experiences like that, in small ways and large ways. And after you move through it, think, thank goodness the answer was no, when I was doing that praying. But right now, there was a situation in my family 14 or 15 months ago where my siblings and I noticed that my father was not doing well, and indeed turned into a sudden medical emergency and nearly 2 months of hospitalization. And it was a very frightening time. My siblings, however, we all moved in and figured out what our strengths and skill sets were, what sort of gifts we had to give in terms of the caretaking of my father. And when he was finally able to come home from all of that hospitalization, he moved in with me. And I was so scared at the time, so scared of, can I do this? How do I take care of my father, who really has always been taking care of me? And with the help of my siblings, I am so grateful that he is there with me now. It's wonderful. He is actually inspiring my writing, because in the morning he's especially lucid, and you're a psychology major, so you understand Erickson. And as people get older, they really reflect a lot on the early years of their lives. So he's at breakfast time, he's telling me these stories from his childhood that I had never heard before. And it was a difficult childhood in the Depression. And he was the son of a tenant farmer. And I take these notes, and I'm keeping a journal of these stories. One of them prompted a poem that's actually called Daughter of a Tenant Farmer's Son. And so his presence not only is allowing me to give back all of his gifts from my childhood, but he's my muse.
Right, what a gift.
Yes, yes. And I would say that he and I are built the same in terms of personality and emotional level. And he is fun and grateful. And, every morning, in fact, his greeting to me in the morning is, well, I made it through the night. I've got another day ahead of me. He's 84 years old with heart failure, and every day is a gift for him, and he's telling me that every morning. Every morning.
What's his name?
Bob Nightingale. Thanks for asking. Yeah.
Oh, I just so I've gotten chills a couple of times during our podcast from your sharing. So it's really, really beautiful. So I wanted to ask if there's a favorite memory. You've talked a lot about your relationship and stuff, but if there's a favorite memory of something or a time spent together or something that you've done together that was really fabulous that you'll never forget.
Well, I have a funny memory where you started saying that the first thing, and Heidi's going to crack up right now. It was this last late spring, early summer, and my husband was doing a lot of work at Heidi's house. My husband adores Heidi, and she knows what I'm talking about already. And he was transplanting hostas, and he head to toe covered in mud. And so I have a picture somewhere, I think I posted it on Facebook, of Heidi hosing my husband down. Out in her
Laura looking like she was in a hazmat suit because she was wearing white that day, but I also gave her, so that the hosing could happen and she would not get wet, I gave her this white zip-up coat that I have for raincoat, and then it has a big hood over it, and she looked like she was in a hazmat suit out there helping to hose down her husband, who's, my part-time gardener.
Yeah.
But that was like the first one. It's not like our
funny.
best memory, but it was. We laughed so hard we were crying that day.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that happens so often when we're together, is that we will have these moments
Yes.
where we're just. But I'd have to say probably the best memory for me was I got accepted to present a paper in California. And my daughter being on the spectrum, my husband couldn't really go with me. Somebody had to be there with her. So Heidi went with me when I went to present this academic paper. And I was terrified because I was still in school. I wasn't even a graduate yet. And Heidi and I went and spent 4 days in Southern California in November. So I know it was terrible.
You suffered through.
Yeah, and just getting to, it was like 4 days in each other's pockets. And just... At no point did we get annoyed with each other. We were like, oh, let's go do this. Oh, let's go. It was a really great, like, sisterly weekend, long weekend. And so there's no one specific memory in that weekend, but just that whole weekend. It
was huge pride for me because at the time I was in professor role for her, to see her presenting as a graduate student. At that point, she was in her master's program at a major conference for the Modern Language Association. That was... lots of fun and lots of pride on my part to watch.
And going to the pool, it's 75 degrees out, and people are like in parkas in California. And we're like,
perspective.
We literally saw people in like those heavy wool Irish sweaters, and we're like running around in shorts. And
we're from the Finger Lakes. This is swimming weather.
That's super.
So, favorite memory for me. There are a lot of these little things that I do that are sort of goofy mistakes.
That I Love Lucy moments.
Laura refers to as I Love Lucy. I'll just be seriously trying to accomplish the right thing, and a crazy expression or word comes out that wasn't supposed to be. It was in the wrong place, the wrong part of my mind, and she came up with this expression and this idea like, you are like Lucy, and I love Lucy. So now we have this fun inside joke about I love Lucy. So there's not a singular memory, but I love this idea that she loves that goofiness that inadvertently happens. That's why it's always so funny.
Serious. That's why it's always so funny, because she's like really earnest about whatever it is, and I'm like, really?
Because it'll be a goofed word, or
Siri hates
the
her
over
voice.
55 brains.
Siri hates her voices, always changing words on her, and then I text him back to her, and she's like, oh my. I didn't really say that.
Oh, so when you use voice to text, it doesn't.
The last one was asking her if she does these lovely soy candles that she makes, and I was out of the ones that she had given to me for Christmas, and so the last text said, I really would love some more of your soy
orange spice pregnant.
I don't know why candles came out as pregnant for Siri, and I didn't go back and spell check. So she sends a message back and says, what is orange spice pregnant? And how do I get it for you? And my response was, I love Lucy moment. I meant candles.
It's funny. Well, it makes sense that you would have, you would develop a language together, because so much of your work is words and language, and so that's really sweet. So do you watch I Love Lucy episodes?
I probably have most of them memorized.
Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Usually we binge watch British period dramas on
Yes,
Netflix.
we tend to
That's
have
when we
that
get
in
together and
common.
watch
Isn't
it.
Netflix awesome?
Oh,
And Amazon
that's
Prime,
something to
both
be
of them.
grateful for.
Yes.
Thank you, Netflix. So is there anything else that you want to share? Do you want to talk any more about your publishing house?
Well, I there's one thing I haven't said that I'm grateful for, and if I don't, he won't cook me dinner tonight. And that's my wonderful husband.
And what's his name?
David.
David.
And
So do you want to give him a shout out?
I love you, David. And he is.
You can tell him what you want for dinner.
Oh, here he knows. No, he's like borderline gourmet cook, and he really is my rock and holds everything together, and is wonderful with Marin. And I'm just really grateful that he is, there for me in no matter what, the good stuff, the bad stuff. He's, I was in a hospital once, and he held my hand when they were taking care of some really nasty stuff, and he really has been amazing. So I have to say that, because I would feel really bad if I walked out of here without saying how grateful I am about him.
Absolutely. Anything else you want to share?
I just want to give a shout out to Claire Songbird's Publishing House, and anybody who might be interested in publishing with us or purchasing the work that our writers and poets are writing. And ask them to go to Claire Songbird's Publishing House webpage, which is found by going to www.clare, spelled Clare, like the county in Ireland, Songbirds, just as it is, pub, P-U-B, think of pubs in Ireland, .com.
Okay.
So www.claresongbirds.pub.com. Take a look at our submission guidelines and take a look at our store, our catalog of books. There's also news. There's some really fun links there. So I guess that's my shout out is that we have many regional writers, and I'd love to, uncover some more Finger Lakes writers who would be interested in submitting.
Perfect. And are you doing any upcoming workshops or ways that people can work with you?
Laura and I have just brainstormed an idea around a writer's retreat here in the Finger Lakes at the Inns of Aurora.
Oh, beautiful.
It's at our brainstorm stage, but our brainstorms tend to actualize. But we also promote our writers very strongly, and we try to find venues for them to do readings, etc. We have one of our writers, an older writer at 83 years old, who will be reading at the Red House as an opener before their On Golden Pond show.
Oh, beautiful. In Syracuse.
In Syracuse, she'll have a full hour reading before their matinee opening.
And that's such a beautiful, Golden Pond's beautiful.
Yes, and this particular collection really is, so many of the poems are reflections of people who have passed or ideas and places and memories. So it's perfect for On Golden Pond.
That's perfect. Well, good. Thank you. So that brings us to the end of our time together today. So I want to thank you, Heidi and Laura, for coming in and being guests with us today. I really enjoyed our conversation. And like I said, you gave me some chills. So beautiful stories and shares. And to our viewers, I want to say have a beautiful day. Remember to share your gratitude, and if you or someone you know would be a great guest for the podcast, you can contact me through Finger Lakes One or through Facebook, because we're scheduling out. We're doing this every week, so we'd love to have folks from around the region come. And with that, I'll be back next week with 2 more guests. So until then, share your gratitude, and may 2018 be your best year yet. Thank you.